All right, hello, we're going to get started, everybody. So, welcome, Tanse, Natotamak, Kamama Kanitigasan, Mackenzie Brown Nitigasan, Miss Butchius Kahagan, Ochinia. So, welcome, everybody. My name is Mackenzie, and my traditional name is the Butterfly. And I hail from Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, but make Edmonton my home now. And I am the project manager with Indigenous Tourism Alberta. And if you've been watching our webinars, you know this. You know all about me. I've been here for a little while, and this is actually our last webinar of the year, which is crazy. So we most likely will have some new webinars coming up in the new year, but for right now, this is going to be our last webinar. This webinar is going to be recorded, and it's going to be made available on our YouTube channel, and then as well as our Indigenous Tourism Alberta.ca website under industry resources, where you can find all of the other past webinars. I'm excited because today's webinar is all on the national guidelines, so we're going to get into that in a little second. But I would also like to acknowledge that I'm on Treaty 6 territory, but I'd like to acknowledge the treaties and the treaty lands that we have in Alberta, home to many Indigenous nations, as well as a homeland of the Métis Nation of Alberta too. So I'd like to acknowledge all 4 treaties, our Métis regions, as well as our Métis settlements as we move forward today. So as you know already, I'm the presenter today. So I'm Mackenzie, project manager for Indigenous Tourism Alberta. I've been working in this role for since June, I guess, which is crazy. It feels like time has flown, but I've been working in the tourism industry for a long time. If you watched past webinars, you'll know that I am a drummer and singer, and I operate a tourism business called Warrior Women alongside my mom. But then I took this position on, so my mom is riding solo and doing a really good job, and then I've been working here. So my past positions have included working with the government of Alberta in Indigenous tourism, as well as Explore Edmonton as their Indigenous Tourism Development Specialist, and now ITA. So without further ado, some of the objectives that we're going to go through today is this is all based on national guidelines. So we're going to go through what are the national guidelines. We're going to go through definitions of Indigenous tourism, just because that's in the national guidelines. We're going to go through authenticity, and then look at in development, market ready, and export ready. So the national guidelines, what they are, is it was created by the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. So they are our national body. And the national guidelines are kind of a step-by-step process that tourism businesses go through. And the reason why we have a step-by-step process is because there are certain criteria that your business needs to meet in order to meet the standards of the tourism industry. Especially when you start working with international travelers and in the travel trade, which we'll get into. You need to have your business meet these certain requirements. So by following these step-by-step processes, it also makes sure that we have a high quality of products across Canada, and that they are meeting industry standards, and that we're constantly delivering a consistent high quality tourism experience each and every time. That's really important. It's one, it's important for reviews. Two, it's important that we meet those requirements so that then people will want to continue coming to our businesses and hearing about our culture and hearing our stories. So I'm going to take you guys through some of the key features of the national guidelines. What I really recommend is that people go to these national guidelines afterwards and really do a deep dive of them. Take your business, there's checklists, there are things that you can read through. It will literally tell you if you are an in development business, read these sections. If you're market ready, read these sections. If you're just interested in tourism, read these sections. So you can find this at indigenoustourism.ca/corporate/national standards. So again, that's indigenoustourism.ca, not Indigenous Tourism Alberta. The national guidelines are from the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, which is kind of like our mothership. They're our national body. And then we are a provincial organization. So yeah, go through these national guidelines on your own time as well, but I'm going to go through some of those key features of the national guidelines. So the first thing that we go through in the national guidelines are the Indigenous tourism definitions. Many of you have heard these definitions, but it's always good to re-go through them and make sure that you're all familiar with them. So all of these definitions were created by ITA, the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, and they are what we run under as well as a provincial organization. So the first one is Indigenous tourism. So the definition for Indigenous tourism is 51% Indigenously owned and operated. So majority owned. There's also a strong demonstration of connection and responsibility to local Indigenous communities and the traditional territory where their operation is based. So a really good example of an Indigenous tourism business is the Grey Eagle Resort and Casino in Calgary. So the Grey Eagle is owned and operated by the Tsuut'ina First Nations. So they are 51% majority owned and operated. And then they demonstrated connection and responsibility to the local community who owns them, Tsuut'ina. So they hire Tsuut'ina staff, they train them. They have other different kind of training programs as well. And then they also tell the Tsuut'ina story too. If you've ever been inside the Grey Eagle Resort and Casino in certain places, they tell that story. So that's an example of an Indigenous tourism business. And there are many, many others that fall into the criteria of what is an Indigenous tourism business. So we have the Stoney Nakoda Resort and Casino, and then these other ones kind of fit into some other categories. So I want you to think of Indigenous tourism as kind of that umbrella definition, and then you have other definitions underneath that. So the next definition is Indigenous cultural tourism. And what that means is that it meets the criteria of Indigenous tourism. So again, it's 51% Indigenously owned and operated, has a responsibility, that connection to the local Indigenous community. But then a significant portion of the experience incorporates Indigenous culture in a manner that is appropriate, respectful, and true. So a really good example of this is Métis Crossing. Métis Crossing is located in Smoky Lake, and it's located on several river lots that came together from the Métis people, and that's where it's housed. And the entire Métis Crossing experience surrounds the Métis culture. So you can take a Tales of the Trapline experience where they take participants out snowshoeing, teach them how they used to trap, teach them what they brought in their grub boxes, all of those different things. They have a Paddle into the Past, teaching all about the Métis culture, homesteads, Métis trappers' tents, and then you canoe down the river. So you can see how this is a business that a huge portion of that experience is about the Métis culture, is about their Indigenous culture, and it's presented in a way that's appropriate, it's respectful, and it's truthful. So that's what it means to be an Indigenous cultural tourism experience. And majority of our members actually do fall into the Indigenous cultural tourism experience because a lot of people will end up incorporating aspects of their culture into their businesses. And then the next definition is Indigenous culinary tourism. So this is a really big growing aspect of tourism. So it takes something that was a tourism service, such as going and getting lunch, and it elevates it. You know, we can see culinary experiences, foraging, storytelling, preparing the food in a way that represents and respects Indigenous culture and traditions. And so yeah, the experience really revolves around food and culinary and yeah, those stories behind preparing food. So this is, again, this is really rapidly growing. The interest is super high for these kind of experiences, these Indigenous culinary tourism experiences. And then we have Indigenous cultural experiences. So this refers to a tourism business that doesn't meet the Indigenous tourism category. So it's not majority owned and operated by Indigenous peoples. So it doesn't meet the Indigenous tourism criteria. However, it does offer the visitor a cultural experience in a manner, again, that is appropriate, respectful, and truthful of the Indigenous culture being portrayed. So a great example of this is Head Smashed in Buffalo Jump. You know, it's UNESCO World Heritage Site, but it is not owned and operated by Indigenous people. It is owned by the government. But they do a really fantastic job of respecting the culture and giving that cultural experience that is appropriate, respectful, and truthful. And they hire many Indigenous peoples to work on their grounds. So we see that with Head Smashed in Buffalo Jump. Fort Edmonton Park's another really good example. Same with Alisa Napi, Writing on Stone Provincial Park, again owned and operated by the provincial government, but is a significant Indigenous historic site. So that's what it means to have an Indigenous cultural experience. And then authenticity. This is in the guidelines too, because authenticity is at the heart of Indigenous tourism. It means that there is active involvement of Indigenous peoples. It means that the Indigenous tourism experience is offered by Indigenous people, not about Indigenous people. And it means that you're following correct protocols. You're asking your community what you can and cannot share. You're making sure that what you are presenting is truthful, it's respectful, it's authentic to your culture, to yourself, to your community. It has responsibility. We always talk about responsibility, and that responsibility is authenticity. So in the national guidelines themselves, there's actually a checklist that you can go through on authenticity. So obviously, even within Alberta, we have several different Indigenous nations that all have different protocols, different customs, different languages, different traditions. So we cannot create a blanket statement of what is authenticity because it's really dependent on that community and what they believe is truthful, respectful, and authentic. So this is why we suggest reaching out to your local community, talking to your elders to make sure that you are providing that authentic experience. And then within the national guidelines, they worked alongside Destination Canada, and they originally did some research looking at the US and US travelers' perceptions of Indigenous tourism. And while these are stats that relate to the US market, we found that it heavily relates to majority markets that are looking for Indigenous tourism experiences. So that's why I decided to put this in here. So we look at visitors coming from other countries, even domestic travelers traveling within Canada, and they prefer those one-on-one interactions with Indigenous people in small and intimate groups, which works in favor during COVID. Again, with the new restrictions that just came out, we cannot have any kind of social gatherings, but once things open up, it lends itself really well to having those small one-on-one. Travelers also want to be actively involved in learning about cultures, traditions, arts, food, storytelling, and history. So how can you make your experience very active, not in the physical sense, but so that people are actively learning as they are experiencing. They're doing those hands-on things. They're having those epiphanies. Travelers also really want to learn about your connection to your land, nature, and the environment. That's something that is very enticing to a traveler that they really love to learn about. You know, we see Indigenous cultures across the world have a inherent connection to the earth, but we see that a lot of travelers that might come from cultures that don't have that relationship to the earth. So they're very intrigued by that and they really want to learn about that. So make sure that you're sharing that. Travelers are interested in participating in adventure, both physical and mental adventure. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind when you're creating your experiences, when you're giving your experiences. Think about that. Travelers are looking for unique experiences. We find that Indigenous tourism experiences are very unique. And also think about how can you make your experience even more unique? What's unique about yourself that you can share? Travelers tend to have a little bit of a lower awareness and understanding of Indigenous tourism in Canada. And this goes for both domestic as well as international tourism. So that's one of the reasons why we're here, Indigenous Tourism Alberta, is to promote that understanding of Indigenous tourism and what is available. But yeah, we are typically seeing that across Canada, across the world, people don't quite know or are aware of what they could be doing in terms of Indigenous tourism. So that's when marketing efforts are very important. They're important for us and they're important for you and your business too. And we see that there's a lot of confusion over wording and definitions. I know for myself, I do a lot of Indigenous awareness training, and I see this a lot in, you know, Canadians. They can get confused over wording and definitions, and it is the same with travelers too. If they're coming to a completely different culture, they don't quite know what they can say or do. So just make sure that when you're providing your experience, that you're upfront with them, you let them know proper terminology, what you call certain things, and then proper protocol, because people want to do the right thing. And this in turn also makes the traveler, the visitor, more comfortable. And that in turn means that they leave you better reviews, that they tell their friends, that then more people come and experience your tourism experience. So education, you can absolutely educate while you're doing your tourism experiences. People want to learn, people want to be hands-on. A couple more things about US travelers, but remember that a lot of this relates to other types of travelers in our markets, is that most travelers believe that Indigenous cultural experiences stand out more than typical travel experiences, and they imagine that it could actually transform a vacation from ordinary to extraordinary. So that's great for us. We're seeing there's a huge shift in people wanting to travel for the sake of travel to traveling and having an experiential, transformational travel experience. So they want to feel like they are transformed when they get back home, that it is something that truly touches their heart. And we've seen that Indigenous tourism offers and lends itself very well to helping people to really connect back with themselves and to have those kind of transformational experiences. So this type of travel is highly experiential and emotional, and it's seen as providing the traveler with a different perspective on a destination as well as a way of life. So Indigenous tourism teaches different ways of living, doing, being, and knowing. And that means that it is a personal experience rather than a mass-produced experience, which is also great for us because many of our businesses are sole proprietors and offer that one-on-one personal experience. And that is our uniqueness about the industry. So also in the national guidelines, there are some wonderful ideas and some tips and tricks on providing really great experiences. So some of those include being yourself, being authentic, avoiding those staged experiences. People really want to come and they want to experience something that's real. They want to hear about your story. They want to get to know you as a person. It's those personal, small, intimate experiences. That's what people are looking for. They're looking for that connection with one another. So be yourself. Don't worry about having everything absolutely perfect. You know, be yourself. And then there's also interaction. So this kind of falls into what I was just talking about. So people want to interact with you. You want to interact, let's say you have a larger staff base, they want to be able to interact with those people too. They want to interact with the land, they want to interact in all different kinds of ways. So make sure that you're able to kind of offer that interaction with one another, and that instead it becomes a two-way conversation when you're doing your experience rather than a talk, because then it makes it experiential again. Another really good tip is include land acknowledgements in your business and experience descriptions. People want to know what a land acknowledgement is. They want to know the land that you're on, why your business is on that land, and your business's connection to that land. Especially, you know, we were talking again just previously about how people want to know about our connection to our land. This is just another way that you can kind of bring that full circle. And also when you include land acknowledgements, it helps with people's education. It helps with people also being aware of where you are in the country, where your business is based, which is also really important too. And then when you talk about your business, focus on what makes it unique and different. You know, what in our sacred teachings, we are taught humility. And so we are taught to be humble. And that can be tough sometimes, because the way that the business and tourism industry is it's really selling yourself and selling your business. And so there's a way that you can still be humble about talking about your business, but you can focus on what makes your business unique, what makes your business different, and why you love your business. That is something that is very humble. Why you love your business, why you're in the business, why you're in the Indigenous tourism industry. So make sure to share that. People love to learn like what brought you to having a business, what brought you to offering experiences. People love to learn that. And then host visitors with the understanding that they are interested in Indigenous culture, but don't necessarily understand us or have ever learned anything about our history and relationship to Canada. So this is in particular, you know what, this actually relates more to international travelers, but it also relates to domestic travelers too, because there are a large portion of Canadians that don't know about our culture, and that is fine. And that is something that Indigenous tourism is a way of educating, and it's an approachable way to learning about truth and reconciliation. And so that's why a lot of Canadians want to be involved in Indigenous tourism experiences, because they want to learn. They want to learn in a fun way. So make sure that is in the back of your mind. I know that my mom and I had run into this a couple times, because we were working with like the Australian Pacific Tour Company. We would start saying something and somebody would raise their hand and say, "I'm so sorry, I actually don't know what you're referring to." We thought, oh yeah, like for example, we would say, "Oh yeah, we smudged before we came here, and so we're ready to get going." And somebody would say, "Hey, what's a smudge?" We're like, oh yeah, that's right. Or there's a really awesome story about Brenda Holder, who's the chair of our organization and owner of Mohegan Trails. And she actually got started in Indigenous tourism because she was taking a group of travelers out, and as they were walking, she saw some signs that a bear had been around. She saw a bear print, all of these different things. And she had mentioned, "Oh yeah, there's a bear around." And she kept on walking, and the group said, "Well, how do you know that?" like, how do you know that there's a bear around? And she said, oh, well, you see, like, you can see those, the boughs of the trees are kind of like broken over there. You see the paw print there. They had no idea, because sometimes we take for granted what we know and expect that other people might just have the same understanding, but lots of times they don't. And that's what makes it special, is that you can share those different things. Clearly name your community or nation within your marketing descriptions. Share your language if you like. Your visitors are interested in learning. So yeah, that's why whenever I start these webinars, I will say my name, my community, and then we have it on our website as well, and encourage other people to mention that on their website too. All right, some more tips too is that visitors are seeking what is unique. Again, this comes up constantly. Share your community story. This is really important. If you come from a specific community and you want to share different aspects of your community story, by all means. Again, make sure that you have connected with your community and what you're sharing is appropriate to be sharing. That's very important. That's the most important thing. But share your community story. Share where you come from. People really like to learn that. And lots of times when I'm doing experiences, I will ask where other people are coming from, where for them to share their community story, because I find that very intriguing and it connects everybody. And then acknowledge that there are locations and informations and stories within your community that your community has decided not to be shared, and you can tell your visitors why. So let's say that there are some sacred grounds. You can mention to your visitors that there are sacred grounds, why they should not be visited, and those kind of reasons why as well. You know, in Jasper we have some sacred grounds, and people are always very interested in going and seeing them. But when we explain, you know, those are meant for ceremony. We don't want people from outside the community going to those. We want to make sure that they're safe and preserved. Then people really understand, and they usually have other questions that they want to ask. Well, what makes a sacred ground a sacred ground? All of those different things. So you can acknowledge that there are locations that your community doesn't want to share. I put in here a living culture. This is important. It's a common misperception for travelers that our culture is in the past, whereas we are definitely still alive, still thriving, and we have this beautiful culture that is even being shifted to being more modern too. And so when you are sharing your culture, make sure that you're not honing in on stereotypes, and that you're presenting in a way that makes travelers remember and realize that our culture is still very present. It is still very living. It is still very abundant. So that's really important. And then just some other tips are, when you're marketing your experience, we always say faces, not places. So make sure that your marketing photography has people like taking part in your experience. You want to be able to showcase to people what they could experience if they came to yours. And then also highlight your knowledge keepers and storytellers by name. You can tell their story too, if appropriate and if asked. So I know my mom and I, every once in a while, we would do an entire experience program all on elders and tell the stories about our particular elders, because they really influenced where we came from and where we are now. So make sure that you can highlight those knowledge keepers and those storytellers and your elders. And it's a great way of respecting them and for honoring them when you're doing your experience. All right, so we had went through a little bit of authenticity and recommended protocols just at the beginning, just talking about how authenticity is at the heart of Indigenous tourism. But these are some recommended steps within the national guidelines, all on authenticity and recommended protocols. So again, I want to mention that I do highly recommend that you take a look at the national guidelines and that you go through them with your business in mind. And there are some checklists that go through good authenticity practices and protocol practice. All right, so again, do your due diligence to make sure that the cultural content that you are sharing has been given the go-ahead from keepers of your culture, elders, and that it was developed under the direction of Indigenous peoples who are from the culture being interpreted. This is very, 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 very important. Make sure that the stories that you are sharing are meant to be shared. And because there are certain parts of our culture that is meant to be kept for us and that are sacred and not meant to be shared all the time, but there are so many aspects of our culture that can be shared. So just make sure that what you're sharing is appropriate, is respectful, is truthful, and that different knowledge keepers and elders have given the go ahead. Again, make sure that it's led by Indigenous people. So if you have some non-Indigenous people working at your Indigenous tourism business, great, that's fantastic. Make sure that the people who are giving the experience are Indigenous. That's very important. Absolutely, like there can be supportive roles within experiences that can be done by non-Indigenous people, but it's very important that that it is led by your Indigenous staff. And then those face-to-face interactions, again, people really want to be able to interact with one another. They want to be face-to-face. Obviously with COVID, that's a little bit more tough. So we see a lot of online experiences coming out. But yeah, remember that people really want those small, intimate interactions with one another. And then another tip and trick is protecting the cultural authenticity and your community. So remember that when you are doing Indigenous tourism, it is more than just being in the tourism industry. We have a role and a responsibility to showcase the beautiful parts of our culture, to help people understand, to help people want to connect with our people. It's something that's very beautiful. And so please remember that we do have a role and a responsibility to showcase ourselves in an authentic and truthful way, and that we have that responsibility to our communities as well. So again, this goes through making sure that you're protecting sensitive areas. I always encourage people to invite your community to your experience so that they can see what you're doing. And making sure that when you're doing your experience, that it is impacting positively on your community and other Indigenous peoples. You don't want to be doing something that's impacting our people negatively. There's so many positive things to our beautiful culture that we can share and that we can showcase, and that we can acknowledge things that haven't been done correctly and how we are moving forward as a people, and that we are resilient and strong. And then also make sure that there's communication and correct behavior. So make sure that there's communication for your visitors, make sure that they know where they're going, and then also make sure that there's communication to your community as well. If there's somebody coming onto the community for an experience, make sure that your community knows. And so that people aren't driving by on their truck like eyeing them up, saying like, who is that person? So again, it's just make sure that you have that responsibility to your community if you're on reserve or on nation or settlement. All right. Now we're going to get into business readiness. So also in the national guidelines, this is when we get into the criteria that should be met in order to meet industry standards. So within the tourism industry, we have 4 different types of business readiness. We have in development, visitor ready, market ready, and then export ready. And think of it as you start in development and then you go, and if you want your final destination to be export readiness, that's the final destination. We have lots of businesses that just want to be market ready, and that's fine too. But I'll go through some of the benefits of becoming export readiness and why we try to get our businesses to that state. All right. So this is the criteria passed in development. And the reason why I'm doing that is because in development is when you are in development to become visitor ready. So it means that you don't have these things. If you don't meet this criteria, that means that you're in development. So when you become visitor ready, that means that you are open and you're able to invite some visitors into your business. And the criteria for this is it means that you have all required business licenses, insurance, and legislative permits to operate legally in your location. So it's super important that you're a registered business if you're starting to welcome visitors in. It's just a very important legal thing. Same with insurance too. You never want something to accidentally go wrong and your business to not have insurance. That's when you get into sticky water. In order to be visitor ready, it also means that you maintain a staffed business location with a set schedule of operating hours. This does change a little bit because sometimes we have businesses that operate in one location or they do walking tours, so they don't have like a fixed retail space or a fixed space where people go first to meet and then go out. But it means that you do have some kind of location and that you can typically tell people, hey, we are open Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or we are open every Wednesday, and we do experiences every single Wednesday, something like that. You also need to provide your contact number and email contact year round. That means that people can get a hold of you. And then if you're closed for the season, make sure that you have those kind of automatic responses through voicemail and email so that people know and that they're not waiting for a long time. One, it's respectful for people's time, and then two, it's just it is part of being a business owner, is making sure that you're communicating with your potential visitors, your potential clients. Have branded on-site signage. Again, this is if you have a direct location, if you have a retail store, hotel, anything like that. If you are operating, let's say, outside and people meet at a certain place, make sure that you have a sign that says like meet here. And then this means that you're taking your dream to reality. So there are different steps in starting a visitor ready tourism business. I'm not going to go through those, mainly because there's a lot of them. But if you go to the national guidelines, it goes through, okay, have you done market research? Is this business a viable business? Does it make sense? How are you going to make money? Do you have a business plan? What are the different parts of having a business plan? And it actually takes you through, this is what you should have in your business plan, this is what you should be researching, this is what you need to consider, all of those different things. If you're interested in starting a business or bringing your in development business to a visitor ready status, what I'm going to suggest to you is that you sign up for our next Indigenous Tourism Alberta Entrepreneur Startup Workshop. So we're going to be having another one of these workshops in June. Keep an eye out on our website or our social media for the next upcoming one, but this will take businesses from where they are and try to progress them in visitor readiness and business status. That is being visitor ready. The first stop of our trajectory, visitor readiness. And then we get to market readiness. So market readiness is the next thing. So it means that you meet the criteria of visitor readiness and you have these additional things in place. So you have to, in terms of market readiness from the ITA national standards, they say that you have to be operating for a minimum of 2 years, and you should be able to be reached 24 hours a day, 365 days a year by website, phone, fax, or email. So people will be able to email you and you'll get back to them in a appropriate amount of time. Or if you're closed, then you have that automatic response that tells them that you can't get a hold of them right now. Same thing, you're able to return phone and email messages within 24 hours during standard business hours. Because you have to think about yourself. You are a business, and so if you phone the bank, you expect that they're going to get back to you at a certain amount of time. So visitors have those same expectations, and it's just a quality of services thing too. This is a big one. This is what really defines visitor readiness to market readiness, is that you have a working website where visitors can obtain key information on your operating hours, your location, how to get there. Let's say you have a Google Maps link, but this is a very important piece. If you're interested, we have a webinar on building a good Indigenous tourism website and the importance of why you need to have a website in working and being market ready. A lot of people are now looking online. They need that ability to be able to book online. If you're offering an outdoor adventure or winter-based experience, make sure that you have an alternative plan if there's bad weather, whether it is a cancellation or if it's a moving into a different location. And then also make sure that if the experience requires special equipment or training, that this is provided. So for example, let's say you are doing a canoe trip, you have to make sure that you have provided life jackets, safety equipment, all of those different things. You also have to make sure that your employees are insured and have the training to do said experiences. So all of these things need to be in place if you're going to become market ready. And becoming market ready means that you typically, if you're market ready, you can work with something called travel media. So you can start working with the media. Again, if you are interested in learning more about working with travel media, we have a webinar for that. And so go to our YouTube or our website at indigenoustourismalberta.ca and go over to industry resources. To be market ready, you also need to have your paperwork and safety documents in order. So you have to confirm with the government if you need to register with HST. That's super important. Also make sure that you have a GST number and that you're charging GST for your experiences too. You have to comply with health and safety regulating agencies in your region or industry sector. So making sure that if your employees need WIMIS, that they have WIMIS, that if you need the health and food safety code, that you take that just making sure that you have all of those health and safety regulations in place and those certificates. Super, super important, especially because this is when you start working with some international travelers too, and most international travelers actually need you to have this in order for them to come and be safe. Ensure that all other operating licenses and permits required to operate your business are in place. So let's say if you are guiding, if you're actually guiding in the national parks, you need to have a specialized guiding interpretive license that's offered by Parks Canada. You need to have that in order to take 5 steps in the parks. So depending on your location, again, make sure that you have all of those operating licenses, that you have those permits, that you have that if somebody shows up and they say, hey, can you be here, that you can prove that you can. This really comes into play if you're on other people's land and territory, but make sure that you have those. Also make sure that you're prepared for accidents. Anything can happen, you never know. And so make sure that you have we really recommend for our tourism operators to have their first aid and to carry a first aid kit too. And then it's important to have liability insurance. For most travel trade partners, and we'll get into travel trade here shortly when we start talking about export readiness, but most travel trade partners, it's actually a mandatory requirement that you have liability insurance. I know that when we were working with the Australian Pacific Tour Company, we had a minimum 2 million liability insurance, just in case somebody fell over and hurt themselves. It's very important that you have insurance. So yeah, again, usually a minimum of 2 million liability standard. With some sectors like adventure tourism, they usually require 3 million. So if you're, yeah, whitewater rafting, anything like that, those kind of adventure, high adrenaline, you need to have that insurance. All right, so we are continuing up and we've reached the pinnacle of business readiness. And so this means that you are export ready. What the heck is export readiness? Well, export readiness means that you can work with something called the travel trade. And like the easiest way of defining the travel trade is working with groups that sell your experience to other travelers, and then they bring them there. Typically, it's international travelers. It can be large groups. It can be small groups. We have something called FIT travel, GIT travel. I'm not going to get into the travel trade because that's not what this webinar is on. But if you're interested, we have a whole webinar on travel trade in conjunction with Travel Alberta, actually, with Anastasia Miller-Stillwell. So check that out. It's on our YouTube, as well as our website, IndigenousTourismAlberta.ca. Go to industry resources, going to learning and events, and then you'll find our webinar on working with the travel trade. So you can really, really, really understand what is travel trade, what do you need, all of those different things. So now this is where it changes a little bit because Travel Alberta actually has some export readiness guidelines that we run under, as well as ITA has some export readiness guidelines. So you have to, again, you have to meet all the requirements of both being visitor ready, market ready, and then these requirements to be export ready. So again, you have to have been in business for, it changes, at least 1 year, typically 2 years, with a proven track record of safe and professional operation. That's very important. You have to be able to show that you have that safe and professional operation status. Again, you have to hold the appropriate licenses and insurances, and you need to be able to provide a copy of it upon request. So what we used to do with For Your Women is we actually had several copies of our licenses and insurances. We just kept them in a binder in our car so that if we were ever needed to show them, that we have them. Again, you have a tourism-based website and you keep it up to date. You have appropriate media materials, images, and something called a flat sheet with a description of your product or experience. If you need more information on what a flat sheet is, Travel Alberta actually has some flat sheet essentials, and we're getting those up on our website too. So this is something that you do need to work with the travel trade. And if you're at that step and you need help with your flat sheet, please feel free to reach out to us and we can help you out. Another big thing for being export ready is that you have to have a booking system. So it doesn't mean that you just have a website, but you also need to have a booking system too. If you are interested in booking systems, we have a webinar on that. So again, head to our YouTube or our website, and you'll find something on online booking. And then again, you have to be able to reply to reservation requests within 24 hours or at least 1 business day. Some more requirements for being export ready is that you have the ability to accept payment from overseas, because that's majority of the people that you end up working with as well, is overseas travelers. So you can have credit card, check, wire transfer. You also need to be able to take travel vouchers from tour operators, all of those different things. If you need help with this or understanding this, again, reach out to us. Another thing is you have to be able to confirm pricing 12 to 18 months in advance, and you need to be able to also confirm allocation 1 year in advance. The reason for this is because the way that travel trade works is that they are already booking for next year and the year after. They already have people who are booking their trips. So you need to be able to say, yep, we can do that and we can do this. This ends up working in a lot of people's favor, actually, because then you know a year ahead oh, hey, I've almost sold out my entire year of experiences. And for a lot of people, that's very exciting. That's like guaranteed typically. And yeah, and it's really good. So you have to make sure that you can do that. You also have to understand and offer something that's called net pricing. So again, net pricing is covered in our travel trade webinar. So if you're at this point, head over to our travel trade webinar and take a look at net pricing, or if you need help with net pricing, reach out to us as well. And then you have those purchase options, and then you have cancellation policies too. You can also provide an accurate description of the product and any important information that a customer should know. So if you're going to be picking them up, what time they should come at, clothing requirements, all of those different things. Ensure that you provide the products and services as promised at that high standard, that high quality. And then in order to be export ready as well, you have to demonstrate a commitment to enter and stay into international markets for a minimum of 3 years. The reason why this is a requirement is because when you start working with international markets, you start doing something that are called trade shows or like market shows. And so you go and you have these appointments with different, they're called receptive tour operators from across the world. You have these appointments with them, but sometimes it takes 2 to 3 years for those initial appointments to become contracts. So that's why it's really important that you have that commitment to enter and stay for a minimum of 3 years. Most people who get into the travel trade end up staying their entire life because it's really great. And yeah, so you have to have that commitment. And to be export ready, it changes. It changes depending on if you're an accommodation, an attraction, retail, business, food and beverage, transportation, or outdoor adventure. So the national guidelines actually takes these different categories and breaks down, okay, these are the requirements if you're an accommodation to be export ready. These are the requirements if you're attraction to be export ready. So I, again, highly recommend that whatever your business is, that after this webinar, you go through the national guidelines with your business in mind, and you take a look at it. And at the base of the national guidelines, there is an Indigenous Tourism self-assessment guide. So it takes you through different boxes to go through the checklist so that you can see, oh, okay, I am market ready. And in order to be export ready, these are the things that I need to currently work on. So I suggest that when you're looking at your business, go through the checklist so that because then it gives you direct, simple, easy to, not necessarily easy to get, but easy, it will just give you an easy guideline to follow in terms of like, okay, I'm visitor ready, I want to be market ready, I need to get a website. That's the thing that I need to get, or I need to get this, and this. So it's a really good guideline for your business and helping you to progress, because lots of times people get to a spot in their business where they're thinking, I don't know what else I need to do. So going through the checklist is just something that's really good in order to help you progress. So again, in order to find the national guidelines that are done by the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, so head over to indigenoustourism.ca/corporate/national guidelines. Or you can also just go to their corporate website and then click development, and then you'll find the national guidelines that way. And then I always like to end on this kind of a point, is that there is such opportunity in Indigenous tourism. We talk about, there's 1 in 4 domestic travelers, 1 in Indigenous tourism experience, 1 in 3 international travelers. So there's such a high volume of demand, but then right now, especially in Alberta, we are a growing industry. We're very much in the infancy stage, so we do have a little bit of a lower quantity of supply for these offerings. but we are growing at a faster rate than the overall tourism industry, and these national guidelines will help you to grow as well. All right, so we have reached question time. So please let me know if you have any questions. You can write either in the question and answer box, or you can write in the chat as well. So if you have any questions, please type them now. I know that it was a lot of information to get through. So if you need time to think about things, stew on them, and then send them later, you can also, oh, there we go. You can also reach out to us at info@indigenoustourismalberta.ca with any of your questions. We are here to help you. We are here to help you progress your business. And so, yeah, I would like to thank everybody so much for attending the webinar. Again, the webinar has been recorded, and it's going to be on our YouTube channel afterwards, as well as our website at indigenoustourismalberta.ca. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and I hope you have a fantastic day.